Every kid should have a viable post-secondary plan that they begin to build in at least the sixth grade, if not before that. And that plan should be based on their interests, their strengths, their desires for their future, what they want to accomplish in life, the goals that they're writing and rewriting and revising. A viable plan means that we think that it will work upon graduation, and plan means that kids have steps that they can take towards that goal that we don't think they need help to do. We cannot continue to wait until the 11th and 12th grade to talk to kids about what they're going to do and be when they graduate.
Hello and welcome to the Future is Clear, Teach Like It's 2045 webcast series. My name is Scott Carr from CESA 2. Today's topic area is career-connected learning with a focus on leadership capacity. Joining us today is TJ Vari, Senior Director of Product Strategy at MaiaLearning. Welcome, TJ.
Thanks for having me on the show, Scott.
Yeah, you bet. So how are you doing? How's the year started up for you? Is it the same as when you were an educator? You know, it's always hectic in September.
I mean, we follow the same calendar as schools do, and so it's busy, very busy. Much different, though, than my previous role as an assistant superintendent in terms of constant, emergencies and fires and stuff like that. But the projects are stacking, and we're big into customer support, so just helping customers use the product the best they can. And I'm really thinking a lot about connecting schools to industry partners right now and getting more kids internships and work-based learning.
Nice.
And so, yeah, it's been wonderful to see what's going on in 70 countries from a college and career readiness perspective.
Yeah, that's really interesting too. We'll talk a little bit about how you guys are in so many countries. Very curious about that. But to get started, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? How did you get where you're at?
Yeah, so my journey has been a serendipitous one. I tell people all the time that I've never really applied for a job in my life. I started working at 14 years old because I needed a job, and my mom had a church friend who needed young people to work in his Dairy Queen. And so that's kind of how I fell into the world of work early. And when I graduated from college, I wanted to be a teacher, but I became a restaurant manager because I was looking for a job to put myself through school. And an owner of a restaurant hired me to manage a small restaurant, and I worked my way up to a bigger restaurant. And then I found myself in a corporate situation where this group of entrepreneurs bought a bunch of restaurants that were failing, but they were in good locations, and they needed somebody to come in and turn them around. So actually, right there in Wisconsin, I went around the state and helped turn these restaurants from the red to the black. And I woke up one day and realized I was teaching somebody, and I wanted to teaching people all day, and I wanted to go back to my roots. When that happened, I moved back east, and I went to work as an English teacher in an all CTE high school system. So I was using my industry experience to connect English to kids' vocational and technical pathways here in Wilmington, Delaware. And I worked at a few vocational schools. I learned a lot about CTE, and I was doing career-connected learning as an English teacher before anybody was talking about career-connected learning. And from there, I was helping to build this program from Yale University National Teachers Institute to University of Delaware, which was very successful at one point. And we were presenting to all of the superintendents in Delaware, and one of the superintendents knew that I had aspirations to be a school leader. We connected, and he had a position in one of his quote unquote secondary schools. I'll come to that in a second. So I interviewed for a secondary school position. It was to be determined where the location was. And when they called me said, "You got the job as assistant principal in a secondary school," it's a middle school. I thought secondary school was high school because I was working in an only high school district.
Right.
And, but I went to work in that middle school as an assistant principal. I loved it.
Wow.
I loved it so much. I was there a few years, and then the principal retired, and I got promoted to principal. And at the time, that school was under review by the state under No Child Left Behind, which meant they came in and said, if you don't turn this school around, we're going to fire you and 50% of the staff in 12
Wow.
months. And so I was like turnaround leader again I used all those skills from the restaurant turnaround.
Yeah.
We turned it around, built teams. It was awesome. We brought one of the turnaround strategies we used was bringing CTE into the middle school. Like we had tons of CTE opportunities for kids, and we can talk about that. Then I got promoted to deputy or assistant superintendent and then deputy superintendent. And I spent 10 years doing that. And in that 10 years, I built a leadership development institute with my business partner, Joe Jones. We wrote a bunch of books. We actually just submitted our seventh manuscript
Wow.
this week, and we do leadership development all across the country. And I was speaking at an event, and I talk about two things. In my 10 years as assistant superintendent, we built pathways, work-based learning. I tell people all the time, I academicized the CTE pathways and I CTEized the academic pathways. Every kid had a pathway. Every kid had CTE. Every kid had AP. And so the kids were graduating. We got kids who wouldn't have otherwise gone to college into 2 and 4 year institutions, sometimes for free. And we got kids into Cornell who wouldn't have might not otherwise have gone there if their transcript wasn't as strong. So we did that, and we saw kids graduate and get back into the economy because I was there 10 years and it worked. And I was at a conference doing a keynote with my partner Joe, and I talk about two things: the capacity of leaders and college and career readiness. And I went on a
Wow.
rant about college and career readiness, and the owner of the company where I work now was in the audience, and I went to work for him as a contractor for a few months and fell in love, and now I work at MaiaLearning, and we do college and career readiness in 70 countries and millions of students in the platform. And it's really cool to see what's going on. And so I act as a thought leader to help schools do
Yeah.
more with college and career readiness. And so that's my story. It's a little bit long of an answer,
Yeah.
Scott, but
Good
I
one.
think it provides context for people on, the things that we're going to talk about on the show.
Yeah. Yeah, I love the journey, and it's what we need in education are people like yourself that have lived, in multiple different arenas, if you would, to bring that more open our eyes to a larger perspective on what we should be doing. So I think it's great. I love your story, man. Let's talk a little bit about the why education needs to shift, why we need to see people like yourself supporting that. With your background, ending up at MaiaLearning and having that strong focus on career preparedness. I love what MaiaLearning has on their website. It says help students to unlock their future, providing personal resources for education and career planning. Right? Why do you see this being so important? Not so much MaiaLearning and the platform, but really your charge behind it and the need for us to see that transformation in our educational system.
I mean, to me, it's obvious, like, and it always has been.
Yeah.
I mean, I wasn't a good student. There were plenty of times when, I had trouble in school, not because I couldn't do the work, but just because it was boring. I felt no relevance
Yeah.
as a kid. And I think there's a lot of kids right now in school who aren't finding relevance. And I and in recent years, I think we're going to see an uptick, but in recent years, especially for boys, there isn't even really the hope that a college education can provide. I think can provide support for a future. I think that's wrong, but I think the thing about school is that it's not as relevant as it needs to be. We still have 100-year-old model, and we
Yeah.
have structural problems. And I think career readiness, switching our brains to career readiness, helps kids go to college. It helps kids see that what they're learning is about their future and not just the unit tests and the teacher. And I think that there's a real transformation that needs to happen. I'm hopeful, though, as much as think we have a lot of work to do, I'm hopeful. I have a podcast called College and Career Readiness Radio, and I talk to people from all over the country who are doing this work, career connected work,
Mm-hmm.
college readiness work, portrait of a graduate, CTE in schools. But I think the more career connected we could be in school, and the more kids get to see themselves in careers and in their future, the better the better off kids will be in the long run. And we need to make things relevant. And so there's a ton that I think structural issues, like I said before, structural problems that we have in education and we can talk about. But career connected learning can really help kids with understanding who they want to be and where they're aiming in the future.
Yeah. Talk a little bit about some of those structural issues. What do you see? You've been doing a lot of work in this area, especially around the leadership end of it, and we'll dive into that in a little bit. But, what are the barriers? What are the issues? What are you seeing?
So when I say structural problems, I'm not talking about like putting a new coat of paint on something and making a slight alteration to what we're currently doing. I'm talking about things like the student day.
Mhm.
So the student day and the amount of time kids need to be in school, sometimes by law, sometimes by regulation, that's a problem. It gets in the way of things like work-based learning, but it also gets in the way of just the neuroscience about
Yeah.
retaining information. Like, when's the last time you spent 7.5 hours going from one subject to the next, trying to
Right.
remember stuff for a test? Like, adults don't do that. College students don't do that,
Yeah.
but we do that to kids. I challenge adults in schools, pick a kid and follow them for the day. I bet you can't do it. You want to know why they act up and get ornery. You're
Right.
sitting for 60 minutes or 90 minutes in an English class, and then you have 4 minutes in a hallway, and then you're sitting for 60 to 90 minutes in a math
Yeah.
class, and then you do that again and again and again. That's crazy. And yet we continue to do it that way. And I just think the schools that are innovating, though, are building
Yeah.
in big breaks, more recess, even through middle and high school, more common space areas, maker spaces, CTE, modified blocks. Like there's hope. Advisory periods,
Hmm.
working on belonging, social and emotional learning, getting kids to connect with themselves and others. There's hope out there, but it's a structural issue. And we got to quit thinking that that's the way people learn. It might have worked the way it was designed. It might have worked to produce factory workers,
Yeah.
but that's
Hmm.
that's not what we're doing anymore. And I could go on and on. Like, another structural problem is grading. We're grading everything. A
Yeah.
100-point scale, the average. Why are we doing that? It never made sense to me, and I don't think it ever will. But the shift to college and career readiness, even in elementary schools, I think that's going to be a game changer for the way we help kids make connections with their learning.
Yeah. Agreed. 100%. I love how you say it. I've also heard you talk a little bit about that there is going to come a time, a tipping point. I think I've heard you talk a little bit about that. What do you think it's going to take to see, the broader systems change? What does that tipping point look like? Or do you think it's just going to naturally happen?
I don't think it naturally happens. I mean,
Yeah.
take COVID, for example. We did some great stuff during COVID, some really innovative stuff,
Yeah.
like the school day. Like, why are we starting high school at 7:30 o'clock in the morning? Lots of schools just said, you know what? Let the kids have some break in the morning. We'll build some structures in. We'll start at 9:30. It was good for teachers, it was good for students, and then boom, when we went back, it snapped back. The system is designed to do what it's doing. It's not going to change on its own. It's not naturally going to change. It's going to take leadership. And I always say the definition of leadership is influence, the challenge of leadership is conflict, and the
Yeah.
result of leadership is change. And we're going to need really strong leaders to battle the conflict that it takes to make the changes necessary. Some of that's going to happen at the state level. It's going to happen through regulation and
Mhm.
law, like every student needs to graduate with work-based learning. And some of that's going to happen with crazy people like me who are willing to make a difference at the school and classroom level. And I'm collecting the others. I always call, I follow Seth Godin's work, and I always say I'm collecting the others. Scott, you're an other. Let's get these people
Yeah.
together and let's make the change that's necessary for young people. I'm hopeful about it, but it's going to mean that we need to get our sledgehammers out. That's for certain.
Yeah. Amen to that. Being a disruptor and trying to move work forward is not easy. I love how you talk about it. I love your passion behind it. One of the other things I've heard you talk a little bit about is the platform that Maya offers, right, it includes a lot of the some of the general type things in regards to career readiness, exploration, stuff like that. But I've heard you talking about how it can help students to discover more about themselves, even socially and emotionally. Talk about the importance of understanding our students in relationship to those types of areas, and how that can help us move forward and build that relevance for our students to be able to see purpose in school.
I think that I think that this is going to become more obvious to people over time. But I think that
Mm.
college and career readiness, career exploration, understanding yourself, taking interest inventories, taking strengths assessments, doing assignments that are related to self-reflection, journaling, writing smart goals for your
Mm.
future, all stuff that Maya includes in terms of how students engage with it. And that's the stuff of the advisory period and of these courses that are being built. That is social and emotional learning.
Yeah.
College and career readiness and college planning and career planning is social and emotional learning. So let's just take, for example, when you have a guest speaker in an elementary or middle school, and I'm all about diversifying the educator workforce, but we're not going to snap our fingers and do that. But guess what we can bring in? Guest speakers, a diverse group of guest speakers.
Yeah.
And then kids see themselves in someone who's presenting in front of the room, a successful person, and maybe even learning about a career that interests them that they might not have otherwise known about. And now they have more of a sense of belonging, and they understand why what they're learning. Like, let's say you bring this person in on the social studies unit and they do something related to that, or you bring them in the science unit and they do something related to the watershed. And so that person's presenting on how they use the information from the classroom that the kids are learning in their job. The
Yeah.
kid gets to see themselves. The kid gets to understand more about themselves. The kid gets to take assessments. They do journaling, goal setting. That's where I think the difference is for kids to really see school as a place to run to versus run away from.
Yeah. Yeah. You say it really well. And a good friend of mine, David Miyashiro, out in Cajon Valley in California, talks about kids foreclosing on the school system as early as 9 years old. And I know you talk a little bit about kids, disenfranchising with school systems. Talk a little bit about that though, because I remember hearing you talk, at that early age is when it happens. Talk about, maybe why that exists. You kind of talked about it here a little bit, but go a little deeper, and then what can we do about it in those earlier ages?
So I hear people say all the time, I think there's some misinformation, misnomers about college and career readiness, but also about the way kids disengage with school. Well, one of the things I hear people say, and I was a middle school principal, so I listen hard when people say, kids start to disengage with school at the middle level, and the middle school is so hard. And I don't see that as the full truth of the matter. I think it actually happens in third, fourth, and fifth grade, and it manifests itself in the
Mm,
middle school. And then we get ninth and 10th graders who don't want to continue, and 16-year-olds who are frankly allowed to drop out.
yeah,
And so that's the way the linear, the through line from elementary to middle to high school, which is why I advocate for more college and career readiness in the K-5 space, because we typically don't start that work until 7, 8, 9, 10,
yeah,
sometimes not even until 11, when we're trying to get kids into college and they have no idea why they want to go, where they want to go. And that's the drain on the financial burden of the university system. It starts K to 12. Not knowing what you want to be when you grow up is a product of the system. It's not
Right.
inevitable because you went to school. If we start talking to kids about college and career readiness in kindergarten and financial literacy in kindergarten and career exploration in
Right.
kindergarten, now they get to
Right.
really understand why school is so important. And then by third and fourth grade, maybe they're more in gear because they're like, I got to get ready. I have to have these skills. And I'm not just learning fractions, I'm learning how to apply that in a job setting. And this guy just came in here and said, if you don't know these things, you can't work in this industry. That I think is where you get the second, third, fourth, fifth grader. You get the reading scores up. Kids want to read. And so, yeah, I think it starts really, really early. And I think it manifests in grades where we're trying to fix a problem that's been persistent for a long time.
Yeah. What do you think is the hang up? What's standing in our way to not, seeing the mindset shift to where, more of us in education, sees that need?
Well, I think one thing is just, again, back to the structures. So just think about the fact
Mhm.
that in many states, you don't earn Perkins and 509 funds until later on in middle and high school, like seventh, eighth grade is usually when that money starts to kick in to be able to do CTE
Yeah.
programming. Well, that's a structural problem. That doesn't motivate elementary schools to spend money necessarily on college and career readiness. I also think it's just a systems design failure. We focus on test scores, and I am not against that. Like I'll hear people talk about being against test scores and the test score focus. I think we ought to focus on test scores,
Mhm.
but I think we also ought to measure belonging, and I think we ought to measure career connectedness, and I think we ought to measure a bunch of other things about the student experience in schools besides just reading scores. Reading scores are super important. I brought reading scores up when I was a middle school principal. I brought SAT scores up when I was an assistant superintendent, and I'm all in on that stuff. But there's other measurements that make it more well-rounded, and I think we need to build those structures. You talk a lot about, Scott, portrait of a graduate. Well, if we had a
Yeah.
portrait of a graduate and our second grade teachers understood what the skills the kids needed, they would quit saying, I'm just preparing you for third grade, and they would start saying, I'm preparing you for life.
Yeah, I see it a lot of the times as a mindset shift. And I think our systems, like you say, are setting us up for failure. We do a lot of chasing of metrics, right? I mean, putting things out in front of us, our state report cards, that outcome data that we're constantly looking for. But yeah, I know it shifting the understanding of what we need to be doing is not easy by any means. Talk a little bit though, I don't want to move away from the elementary part of it yet. Talk a little bit about, and you can talk a little bit about MaiaLearning with this if you want, but what are some of the things you're able to do at that earlier age? Because when I get in and work with school districts, I do a shift from kindergarten all the way through, 12th grade. And that's the hardest area for us to kind of really focus in on and have some kind of impact or understanding of, what should we be doing? Talk a little bit about what should we be doing at those ages.
Sure thing. And guess what? It's not that hard. So,
Okay.
what Maya Learning provides is games and assistance for teachers
Mm.
in K to 5. And these aren't like banded games like K to 3. They're specifically designed for kindergarten, specifically designed for first
Mm.
graders, specifically designed for second graders. And the kids play games and they earn awards in the game. So it's got some incentives and they
Yeah.
build avatars and as the games unfold, they learn about different careers and how money works and financial literacy. So their financial literacy outcomes, they're aligned to national counseling standards, ISCA, ASCA, CASEL. And then there's also lessons for teachers to use in the classroom for the games and also for social and emotional learning, all around the idea of career awareness, career exploration, financial literacy, and knowing more about yourself and having fun. And so that's one way that kids can engage in schools with a technology driven product
Mhm.
that's fun for kids. And I would say to any teacher, build stations around the room. Teachers are getting better at this, and have a station be, one of these games. Have another station be, learning the math concepts. Maybe there's another technology that's being used on an iPad, and then there's another station with a teacher and another station with, writing or something. But I would say use the MaiaLearning product as one of those stations or one of those periods of time for kids to move through the lessons and for teachers to track how kids are doing as they progress through the game, their progress on the game. That's a great way to introduce college and career readiness for kids to understand what kind of careers are out there that they might not otherwise know about, for them to understand how money works at a really early age, and for them to connect that to the learning in their classroom, and for teachers to have some support to do it. Other than that, I say get into the community, have kids go on field
Yeah.
trips, have kids visit colleges, be on campus, do that as early as possible. I mean, guess what wealthy people and resourced people do as soon as they know they're pregnant? They have a 509, a 529 fund. I'm sorry, 529 fund, because they're preparing for their kids to go to college. Well, not everybody even knows about 529 plan,
Right.
right? Not everybody's talking about college to their 5-year and 6-year old, but we could do that in school. And we don't just need to talk about math, science, social studies, and ELA. We can have kids um, answer questions about themselves and answer questions about who they want to be when they grow up. It's a belonging strategy, and it's a career connected strategy, and it's a academic engagement strategy to bring people in. You've got moms and dads out there doing jobs. They love to talk about what they do for a living. And we love to talk about what we do for a living in this country. Who's the first question somebody asks you when you're standing in line at the airport? What do you do? And
Right.
then we're in a 20-minute conversation about what we do, because most people love what they do. And so kids should be able to see themselves in people who love what they do. Let's bring the moms and dads in, and, community organizations. I always tell people, connect to the chamber. When I was assistant superintendent, we connected to state chamber, the county chamber, the local chamber, and the black chamber, and they were all in schools helping out.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a ton of ways to do it, but I think bringing people in, talking about jobs in school more, talking about careers, talking about ourselves, that's the game changer. And hey, listen, you'll put my information in the show notes. Let me know. I'd love to show people the K-5 product that we have. It's really cool. It's innovative. It's neat. It supports teachers. It supports students, and any school can implement it.
Yeah. And it's simple. I mean, it's I love how you say that. It's not hard to do. And that's one of the things when we start to get educators that I work with doing more of this, one, they rejuvenate themselves because it's a rejuvenation kind of process because they see, right, the fact that students will re-engage in the system. So it's, yeah, it's not hard. It's not hard at all. It's a matter of just getting started. And you also talk here a little bit about when we do it in classrooms, now we're closing that equity gap. Now every kid is having an opportunity to expand that, the awareness, the exploration part of it, the connectedness pieces to it. So I think that also is a big part of it. I've heard you talk about viable plans, and I've used this in some of the trainings I've done and some of the conferences I've spoken at. One of the things I'll say is that every kid K-12 should participate in work-based learning.
Yeah.
Every kid K-12 should have a viable post-secondary plan. Talk a little bit about it, because I stole it from you. I love it. Talk a little bit about what that means.
So every kid should have a viable post-secondary plan that they begin to build in at least the sixth grade, if not before that. And that plan should be based on their interests, their strengths,
Right.
their desires for their future, what they want to accomplish in life, the goals that they're writing and rewriting and revising, the journaling that they do. And a viable plan means that we think that it will work upon graduation, and plan means that kids have steps that they can take towards that goal that we don't think they need help to do. And so that plan could be college, that plan could be career, that plan could be military, that plan could be
Mhm.
trade. I'm not against any of the ways that kids can enter into their post-secondary experience, but they need to have a plan. And we cannot continue. This is where I get on a rant, Scott. We cannot continue to wait until the 11th and 12th
Yeah,
grade,
right.
talk to kids about what they're going to do and be when they graduate. And by the way, there's a lot of 2 and 4 year local institutions, state by state, that are either free or affordable, that kids can go to school and they don't know about it.
Mm,
And so you'll hear 11th and 12th graders say, well, college is too expensive in a state where there's a community college where they can go to school for free, and maybe a 4 year institution that's willing to give them the third and fourth year for
yeah,
free. And it bothers me that we're not doing this early so that middle schoolers understand what these programs
yeah,
are and that high schoolers are planning for these programs. Think about this. In some of the states, there's like some criteria, like you have to have a 2.9 and then you get this really reduced tuition. But if you don't have the 2.9, you can't get it. Well, imagine if you learn about that in junior year when you have a 2.7,
right,
right?
right,
But if you know about that in eighth grade, you might be more likely to keep your grades up to
right.
be able to access the free tuition when you graduate. Instead, when you talk to kids and they say, well, I can't afford college, it's not true.
Yeah, exactly.
College debt is a problem, don't get me wrong. If we're sending kids to big box schools for more debt than they can afford, I'm not for that. But I'm still very focused on getting more kids into college, especially in under-resourced communities, and especially in under-resourced communities where they can go to school. If they meet certain criteria, they can go to school for free. And I talk to people all over the country about this all the time. And the organizations that support it, including the
Right.
Institutes of Higher Education, are unable to get the information into the middle and high schools for kids to know about it. And we're getting better. I'm still hopeful, but boy, oh boy, is that another barrier to post-secondary
Right.
success. But back to the plan, you start building that plan earlier and you strengthen the plan along the way. And now kids have a portfolio of work that they can demonstrate and show their 4 year academic plan, etc. And MaiaLearning facilitates all of that, by the way. We can facilitate all of that for schools. And I think we're going to see a shift as more schools adopt processes to help with that.
Yeah. You make a lot of great points. I mean, as I work with schools and we talk about that, and I talk about a viable post-secondary plan, K-12, really at those earlier ages, it's about awareness. And when kids become aware of things, to your point, now they can make better informed decisions. Because at the end of it, what I like to say is that, um, post-secondary schooling, 4 or 2 year, might not be needed, but continued learning is always needed. And where you find that and how you find that has to be something that a kid can aspire towards. And if we're lacking building the awareness for our students, K-12, they're not going to be able to make those decisions. They're going to go to colleges that they just want to go to because their friends go there. It's popular, and they're going to exit with debt and probably not get into, even a degree, the direction of what their degree was for a lot of the times. So yeah, totally agree with you. Let's shift gears a little bit to how do we get this done? And you do a lot of work around leadership. So I know I want to start out with something that I talked a little bit about this summer at a conference I spoke at, And that was, and again, I stole it from you, be quite honest, TJ, that you're a firm believer that every leader needs a coach. And
Mhm.
I'm a firm believer that everybody in the educational system is a leader, which means that everybody needs a coach. Talk a little bit about that, building leadership capacity and the importance of being able to recognize we need to be coached around that.
Yeah, so critical, that's true. All seven of our books are about school leadership, school culture. One of them is called Seven Mind Shifts for School Leaders, is
Mhm.
actually about how to make change in schools, attacking perennial problems. Our first book is called Candid and Compassionate Feedback. It's about how to give better feedback. I think
Mm.
reading is critical for school leaders. The average CEO reads 60 books or more a year, and school principals and assistant principals need to think of themselves as a CEO for certain.
Yeah.
Um, I always go back to the law of the lid, and this is from John Maxwell. The capacity of the organization cannot exceed the capacity of its leader. And so I'm going to say that again. The capacity of your
Mhm.
organization cannot exceed the capacity of your leadership. And you can't pour from an empty cup. And so the neuroscience is also clear that we're not very good reflective practitioners. We don't know how well we're doing when we're trying to do something well. And so we need another set of eyes on what we're doing. It's why observation is so important for teachers. It's why principal supervision is so important for principals. But we can't stop at just supervision and evaluation. We have to have coaches, outside coaches, people who have been effective in the role, brought in to coach principals just like this. I coach principals all the time. My company, the Schoolhouse 302, Joe and I, we coach principals across the country. And sometimes we do that live, and sometimes we take over a retreat and we train principals on leadership capacity. Sometimes we do webinars virtually. In fact, we're going to be doing a webinar um, in a couple of weeks for a Georgia organization, a bunch of school leaders, superintendents, directors, and we're developing their leadership capacity, their leadership skills. We're deepening their knowledge of how to lead effectively in schools.
Mhm.
But I would say that every school leader needs a coach. Like you said, I'm a real big fan of like either quarterly or monthly coaching sessions for principals, mastermind groups that they can join, problems of practice that they can study, and to get perspective outside of the walls of their school. Education is so isolating and lonely. Whether you're a classroom teacher or a school principal, you're typically in your own domain for most of the day and getting very
Yeah.
little leadership development. And I'm not talking about learning the curriculum better. I'm talking about being able to lead your school and being able to implement some of the things that we've been talking about here. Without the leadership capacity to be able to make change, we're going to continue to do what we've always done. And guess what? We're going to expect different results. And it's just not
Yeah.
going to happen. That's a
Not gonna
definition of
happen.
insanity.
Yeah. You're right. Give a few strategies or nuggets, or you could start. Let's do this. Start with what you see as I don't want to call them faults, but I've heard you talk a little bit about educators are naturally just very caring people, and as leaders, we tend to fall into that trap sometimes. Give us give us a few of those types of things, and then what would the strategies on the reverse look like?
Yeah, so one thing we talk about a lot, Joe and I, when we do keynotes and such, is this concept of a culture of nice.
Mm.
Educators are naturally altruistic people. We want to be kind to one another, but a culture of nice typically results in low or stagnant results.
Mm.
Um, Leadership is counterintuitive. So a lot of what we hear and feel and things that we naturally want to do as leaders will backfire.
Yeah.
If without the right leadership training and without the right leadership know-how and without the understanding of how the principles of leadership work, we can easily end up doing something that is the opposite of the truth. So I'll just give you a couple. One is we typically tell new principals, new assistant principals, go in there and make relationships first. Well, I don't know what that means.
All right.
Make relationships first. So Oh, everybody becomes my friend, and then I tell them what they're doing wrong at work.
Right.
I tell new leaders, go in there and do good work.
Mm.
Look at Covey's 13 high trust behaviors. One of them is holding yourself and others accountable. Trust is about one of them is get better. And so we we get that wrong. I'm not saying relationships don't matter.
Yeah.
Relationships are everything. Culture is everything. But we build strong cultures in school by getting better with one another and doing the hard work to improve the school. That's what builds trust, not rubbing people's backs and trying to make friends with them.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very well said. You see that a lot, to be able to deal with tension, to be able to deal with conflict in a way that's productive, in a leadership inspiring type direction, I think is really good. You had said this earlier in the pod here. Definition of leadership is influence, I think is what you say. The challenge is the conflict, and then the result is that change. Is that something you tagged, or did you find that somewhere? That's good.
I think so, but I'm sure I cobbled it together from different resources. I know for certain John Maxwell says the pure definition of leadership is influence.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Right. Yeah.
I tend to I tend to um, gravitate towards work around overcoming conflict. Not all conflict is
Yeah.
unhealthy,
Right.
and I think the greater the change we seek to make, the more conflict we're going to have to overcome.
Yeah.
And so when leaders can find strategies to overcome conflict, typically their influence and their sphere of influence grows and their rate of influence
Yeah.
increases. And so that's what produces the change that's necessary in our systems. And so when I work with leaders, we almost always get to a point where we're working on being able to overcome conflict. Candor is one of the ways we do that.
Mhm.
Candor is a skill. And so if we think we're going to be able to do these things naturally without a coach, without a book, without a podcast, without a clear understanding, without activities, it's probably not going to happen. And I'll say this to leaders too. If we're not focused on school improvement, things will get worse. The status quo
Right.
is fake news. You cannot maintain the status quo. The the getting worse part might be imperceptible, but over time things will simply get worse if we don't always work towards improvements. And improvement doesn't mean massive change either. We should really celebrate incremental improvements in
Yeah.
schools and then stack those incremental improvements for the massive change. We
Yeah.
get better day by day. We get better in a year, not this week.
Yeah, it goes to your point that I've heard you say a few times, that the school system's not complicated, but they are, what do you say? Complex, I think is what you use.
Yeah,
And
I like to say that leadership might be complex, but it's not complicated.
yeah.
Joe and I always say getting to simple to lead better and grow faster,
Mhm.
because leading better and growing faster is very simple. And there are very simple strategies that we can
Yeah.
use to manage ourselves and others. And we have to know what those strategies are, and then we have to use them. And those are two different things, by the way, because I teach a lot of school leaders who don't implement. I just said this to a group of leaders. We run an induction program in Delaware, so you have to come through our program in connection with the Department of Education and a local university to be a certified administrator. And I said to this group, I said, guess what's going to happen after these 7 sessions? There are people in this room who will implement. Those people, it's mostly assistant principals. I said, those people will be the next round of principals and directors and superintendents. And
Yeah.
there are people in this room who won't implement, and they will spin their wheels for the rest of their career wondering why good things aren't happening to them.
Right.
And I know that from the mistakes I've made.
Right.
Like along the way, what you learn, you have to take action on.
Yeah, you say it really well. Implementation is not, it's it can be easier than what we make it, but you got to get it done Totally agree with you.
You got to
Let me
try.
ask you this before we head out. I know you're doing some really, really amazing stuff with MaiaLearning and your leadership stuff. Anything happening in your world that you would like to share and tell us, provide us before we head out?
Yeah, sure. Our seventh book is going to come out soon.
Nice.
It's an instructional leadership book. It's the time, tools, and tactics of an instructional leadership, and it's to help principals to lead learning in their school. And that I think is a really, it's a labor of love. That book is kind of like the books have all been serendipitous too. Like some of them we've been asked to write, some of them we've co-written with others, some of them were projects that
Yeah.
that editors and publishers wanted. So we've been very fortunate with that. But I would say check out MaiaLearning. Visit us at MaiaLearning.com. And I'd love to do a demo for anybody who's interested in college and career readiness. I'm not trying to sell you anything. I just want to improve college and career readiness
Yeah.
worldwide. We love what we do. We have a great team of people who support schools. And then visit me at theschoolhouse302.com for blog posts, podcasts, books to read. Go check out College and Career Readiness Radio on the MaiaLearning website and check out Focus Ed on the Schoolhouse 302. And I appreciate being on the pod, Scott. I mean, this has been an awesome platform for me and a great friendship, I believe. And so let's keep on doing the work. And listen, I would say 608-347-6954.
Yeah.
Call me and we will make it happen. And I will talk to anybody who wants to talk about college and career readiness and the capacity of school leaders.
Yeah, I heard you on Peter Hostrauser's Disrupt Education Pod, and you gave your phone number, and that's how I reached out to you.
I love
So,
it.
yeah, you responded right away. I really appreciate it.
Yeah,
Hey,
go
Mike.
to LinkedIn, DM me on
Yeah,
LinkedIn.
yeah,
I talk to people all the time about,
right.
this work and what we can do and improving schools and I like I said, the others. Let's bring the others. Find the others and let's
Yeah,
collect them all and put them
love
in
it.
one room and let's change the world.
Love it. Love it. All right, one final last question. Our tag is this. The future is clear. Teach like it's 2045. What do you see schools needing to be or will be in 2045 to get this work done?
In 2045, I hope that the school building is not the only place we think of as where students learn. And so in I hope that's 2035, frankly. But we have to get kids, we have to bring people in to our schools and we have to get kids out of the school.
Yeah.
And I'll go back to the science unit watershed. Why are we teaching kids about watersheds in a classroom when we can walk to a watershed?
Right.
And so there's plenty of resources in our communities, and there's plenty of ways to get kids out doing things and learning about the world. And that's what I hope school is in 2045, is that it's not the only place we think of as where kids go to learn in the morning when they wake up.
Yeah, if we can get there, it's going to be a much better place, man. Really appreciate it. Well, thanks, TJ. Appreciate you joining us on the pod, and really, really appreciate it. Thanks.
100%, man, anytime.
You bet. And as we depart, remember the future is clear. Take care, everybody.